Hi everyone, it's Christy and I'm with Mallory. She's holding the camera for me right now in the test gardens on our Friday Live. We start a little bit later this morning. Of course, with winter, you know, the days are shorter, and so we're always trying to figure out what's the right time of day so that we've got sun and you guys can see what we're doing. But we have not been live for a few weeks because of the holidays. So welcome to 2021. We hope your holiday season was great. Hope you had some time to just kind of recharge, refuel, relax, all of that, and ready for the new year. Crazy world that we are living in right now, and it's just wonderful to be out here in the garden just to kind of recuperate and recharge. And I wanted to today going to talk to you about a number of things. I want to talk to you about our exciting smoothie challenge that's coming up. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about some surveys we'd love to do with you guys. We're going to talk about winter months and the difference. What is going on that's really different right now than what you'll see in spring? And for some of you that are brand new at this, this is dramatically different than spring gardening. So it's kind of exciting to kind of get up to speed now, so you're ready to go when spring happens. We'll talk about that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about microgreens, because in the Facebook community, we're getting a lot of questions about microgreens, and so we want to talk about that. So first thing, smoothie challenge. On Sunday, we are doing a 7-day smoothie challenge to kick off the year and to, things are flying on me. It's from the trees above. It feels like it's snowing. But we are starting our 7-day smoothie challenge on Sunday. Check your email. We sent an email with a shopping list of all the different ingredients that are just good to have in your pantry, in your freezer at any time, refrigerator, so that you can make smoothies. And we're going to be doing this with our Chocho protein powder. That was the individual, the guy that we talked with last month, who's doing amazing regenerative farming with the Chocho bean. And that is actually it's really a plant protein that is an amazing superfood. So we're going to be doing all our smoothies with that protein powder, and that's important. So that's good. So we'll be sending out recipes and all of that. The idea is we're going to be taking leafy greens that you're growing on your wall or in your containers, and we're going to be adding those with a lot of other things. So that's coming. So that's exciting. And every month we want to do a challenge like this. So getting you guys used to just using your leafy greens and your herbs in the food that you grow, so that you're actually benefiting. So that's awesome. And then the other thing is we're going to be sending out a survey in our weekly email. Just know that we're going to be giving you an update on that. But we want to get some feedback from you guys on how things are going so far. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, let's talk about winter and what's going on. And I hope you guys can hear me, because there is a blower in the location next to us. But okay, I want to talk first about winter and really what it's like. And the big thing that I want to talk about is really the temperatures, shorter days, and watering. Let's start with watering, because watering is very, very different in the winter. The big thing for everybody is things just slow down in the winter, okay? And please know that, and this is all about kind of peace and patience right now. And so that's okay. These things are, some of these plants sort of, as you guys know, a lot of plants hibernate in the summer. Animals hibernate, and a lot of plants kind of go dormant. Our food that we're growing right now, it's not dormant, it's just growing slow. And when you water and you overwater in the winter, you are actually slowing that growth more, and that's really important to know. And I'm going to have Mallory spend, because she's done some great research on this, I want her to kind of spend just a few minutes explaining what is going on when you overwater.
Yeah.
And let's show this as a great example. This is sage. So Mallory, you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of why the sage has a lot of growth and it's good, but look at what's starting to happen.
Yes, totally. So soil should have about 25% oxygen in here, and naturally that's where it starts out. But if you start to add too much water to your plants, the soil is going to stay super saturated and wet, and there's not going to be oxygen for the roots to absorb, and it's going to actually make it so the plant cannot absorb the nutrients that's in the soil. So these leaves here start to turn yellow. They're turning yellow because it's taking nutrients from the actual foliage itself rather than the soil, and it's bringing that nutrients and energy up to the new growth so that it can perform properly. It's almost like a survival mechanism.
Should I, it's funny because normally you'd think you'd take that off, but it's almost like I don't think I want to, because it's actually using using
exactly.
right now. Okay,
so I'd
that's a
recommend,
great tip.
yep, I'd recommend leaving that on. You can take it off if it's really bothering the look of things in your mind, but I would just recommend leaving that on there and letting it dry out completely. Maybe even put it onto a really bright table or sun.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Take it off the wall or separate it from your plant so that there's air circulating around the whole pot, and leave it in a super sunny location for about 1 or 2 days and let that soil dry out, and maybe even give it some fertilizer after you start to see it recoup. But honestly, I think once we let this guy dry out, it's going to grow even better than it would have initially. So
perfect. And this is the case also with this one, where this is a newer plant. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you guys for being patient. We completely lost our internet connection, and so we're back. We moved actually into my office. So we want to show you. We talked about. We showed you the sage and what was going on there, and that is a wonderful. That is something new, Mallory, that I did not know about. When the leaves yellow, it's actually your automatic reaction is, oh, let's just take those off, they're dead. But actually the plant is using that nutrition, and so if you can keep it on,
Totally.
and let those plants dry out.
Exactly.
So now, I have a lot of my pots on the wall, and so for people that do have the planted wall, at this point in time in winter, I would turn off your timers. You should not be watering. Like right now, especially with the rains and stuff, I'm watering maybe once a week and sometimes every 10 days, because it's just, it's wet, it's colder, things are not drying out as fast. And so you just really want to be observing that. And something that we always notice too in our test gardens is that some plants, they just maybe they have a more established root section. So that pot dries out faster than other pots, and so you need to kind of watch it, especially in the winter months when you've got all this variability going on. So that's important. So now, one thing too, before we get into microgreens, I just want to show you, because I think it's so interesting. Now here is a Bok Choy that was planted back there in November, and this thing is nice and happy, and I'm just starting to harvest it. I could have harvested it earlier, but I just didn't yet. But what I noticed, I put it in the planted wall because I do that because it's easier to hold a lot of the pots that way. But what's interesting is, look at this. There's a lot of root growth, and this is what I love about these pots, is that the plants don't get root bound as much, because it just kind of grows through the felt structure.
Exactly.
And when it's in the wall and it's in that plastic pot that it's sitting in, it's protected and the water flows through, and it's just kind of feeding those roots. Here's one that's been around longer, and look at these roots.
I know, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, I didn't even know it was happening until I pulled it out of the wall.
Well, I do want to make a little comment here. Whenever you're planting, typically you'll plant in, like, say, a terracotta pot or a plastic pot, but these felt pots that we use are wonderful, because instead of the roots hitting the bottom of the pot and starting to circle around, getting root bound, as she said, it's actually going to continue to grow through the felt and just be, it's just make it so that the lifespan can just go for a longer period of time, rather than just going to the base of the pot and circling around, just strangling itself. So, and
what's good about that too is when you do replenish that, like for instance, I probably could just harvest this all together. I mean, I could either take, as I've been doing on this one, take the outer leaves, or I could just harvest this whole thing, plant a new seedling. And what's really nice is all that root material, that's organic material for the next plant that's coming in, right? And so it's kind of helping to regenerate that soil. You're going to be putting in some new fertilizer, make some nitrogen in there, and you've got things happening with that. They're going to break down those nematodes and all of the microbes in the soil. Is going to break down those roots that are already there from the prior plant. So it's just a wonderful
life cycle, really.
Life. Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to show you guys that. This is an arugula that was planted in mid-November, so kind of right about the time you guys probably would have planted box. And if you guys remember, a few weeks ago, Mallory showed us how to take the multi-seed and thin it out. And you can see here, there's not too many. I mean, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4 main seedlings in there now.
And these used to be so small, and now look at how thick those robust stems are coming out of the soil. Isn't that wonderful?
Yep. And I think that if we had not seeded that out, taken some of those out, these leaves would be smaller.
Correct.
And there'd be more of it, but they'd be smaller. And so what's interesting is, like, one leaf equals maybe 3 of the smaller ones.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of really what you want. It's kind of how you think about it. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, and especially with arugula, if you let it be larger, like so, and create larger leaves, I think it ends up being a little bit more spicy. So if you like arugula, but you do not want it to be too spicy, you could just leave it with all those little seedlings in there. But I personally think it's kind of nice to let them grow larger so that when you cook them, they don't lose all that flavor in there.
Exactly. And another thing about the flavor too, since, this has been in there since November, we're going into January. Typically, especially if it was in your peak growing months, which is basically kind of April through October, you would probably be replenishing it. Like every 2 months, you'd be replenishing that plant because it will be growing so much, you're harvesting it a lot. I could be right now, I'm thinking to myself, nothing is going to seed here, it's fine, but I might end up harvesting all of this and putting a new seedling in there because it's been a few months and it's ready for, if I wanted to. I don't have to. Yeah. So I'm going to let it keep growing just like you guys are. So that's that one. This other one I wanted to show, which is interesting, is, I'm sorry, one more thing about the arugula, is what people will notice. If you notice it's starting to be more bitter, like, bitter than like initially it was, that's also a sign that it's getting, it's probably getting past its prime. So usually when your leafy greens or your lettuces start losing their taste, and it typically as they get really bitter, especially like the lettuces and stuff, that's a sign of okay, I need to take it out and replenish that plant because it's done. Is kind of how to think about it. And what's funny is in the summer and the warmer months, it tells you that by going to seed and growing up. But I notice in the winter months, it doesn't normally do that as much. Just the taste changes. It
just starts to taste funny, and it'll start to really slowly grow. It's just got not much left going for it.
It's like stunted in time.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Now this is cool. This is, if you guys remember, this is one where we were kind of showing you, hey, you can maybe plant 2 if you wanted in one pot. This is your viola. And this is your mint, and look at all that great new growth coming
Looks
in with
beautiful.
The mint. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, so these are actually something called rhizomes, which are roots that grow horizontally under the soil, and then they pop out. So there's so many little rhizomes popping out of here. If you were to plant this in your ground, oh my gosh, it would take over your whole yard.
Mint takes over. That's why mint is so good to put in a container, because if anybody's ever done that, oh my gosh, I've had that before, where like I had mint next to some grass, and it literally started growing into the grass, taking over. So you usually want your mint in a container.
In a little container like this, but these cute little flowers will continue to pop out until that mint just overtakes that whole pot.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, now your viola is an annual.
Yes,
okay?
correct.
An annual basically means that, it's a seasonal plant, right? And so it won't last through the seasons. A viola is a wonderful, cool season annual. And that's why you see a lot of these, and it's wonderful that you actually can eat them, which is great. And but its root structure really won't get that big. Yeah. So that's why a lot of times they're called cover crops. Like you put them in there for decoration in the winter when things aren't growing so fast.
Exactly.
So there we go. So that's one. And then I think the last thing we want to talk about is really microgreens, because we have a lot of questions about that. And different people are noticing different germination rates, and what we mean by germination is basically those microgreen seeds sprouting. That's they're germinating, they're sprouting, letting out their little baby leaves, and they start to grow. And what we've noticed in the Facebook community, some people are like, "Oh my God, it's taking so long." And one thing to know, you guys, that might help a little bit with that is that temperature matters. So if you've got your microgreen, pot outside and it's real cold, it's going to take a long time for that to germinate. So a best practice would be, what you want to do is, you soak your seeds, you put them in your pot, you cover it with the wet, damp paper towel, in the dark, and you do that inside. I typically in a pantry, in a closet, like I just put it in a dark place until you see things, the seeds kind of sprout a little bit, and then bring it out. And then I typically don't because it's getting pretty cold outside, I just put it by a very bright window is what I'm doing. I'm not putting it outside. And then, I will, but I do notice it slows down the growth if it's outside where it's really cold.
Yeah.
So microgreens, as long as you're giving them a lot of light, ideally you'd have a grow light on it, but if you just have a really bright window, microgreens can handle that.
Yeah. Or even like now, if you see the sunlight shining on this bok choy coming through the leaves, something even like that coming through a window is perfect, but it's out there.
Exactly. And this one, this is, it's done. So I'm going to plant some new ones. But one thing that Mallory talks about, which is important, is we want to we basically want to dump out the soil, and we just kind of, we want to just spread it out, let it dry out, right? Because what we're noticing with a lot of people, and this is a common thing with microgreens, is mold can appear if you're overwatering it. Literally, if you have a mister, once it's sprouted and growing, you missed it, you don't want to put it underneath the sink because it's too much. It's a small area. The felt bag is good in terms of the summer when you're trying to keep the soil moisture, but this time of year, that's too much water.
Yeah.
So literally, if I don't have a mister, what I do is I get water in my hand and I just drip it. Yep. I just kind of go like that.
Or what I may even recommend is if you get like a small bowl or plate, you can fill up that bowl or plate with water and then put the pot right on top of the water so that the roots are actually absorbing from the bottom up, and that will actually encourage more growth too. Since the water is down at the bottom, it makes the roots have to go deeper, creating a stronger plant. So there's different options. Like I said, maybe you don't want to have a little bowl of water lying around.
That's a great idea. That is a great idea because it's felt. You can do that because it's felt's going to absorb the water.
Correct.
So that's a really good idea. And do you notice here too? This was kind of a best practice. We're rolling this down because you don't need a lot of soil. Nope. Okay, it's pretty pretty a small amount of soil is really all you need. It just the roots need something to hold on to.
Correct.
So I mean, some people actually. I've seen it online where people try to grow them like in a damp paper towel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is so the fibers of the paper towel is going through because all the nutrients are in that seed that it needs to grow. So so that's one thing. But yeah, so basically I'm going to let this kind of dry out again. I'm going to, I'll probably put this in my worm bin. These roots here. This
top section here. And you may, depending on how long this was growing and in certain environments, you may have super thick roots. Like I would recommend taking this out. Just because the microgreens aren't going to be in the pot for as long, so this material here doesn't have time to break down. So if you just use this nice fresh soil here at least one more time, that'll be perfect for microgreens.
Great point. I love that you just said that. Thank you. Because that is true, you guys. Microgreens are quick, right? They're, at the most 30 days. And so there's just not the time for it to break down. That's a wonderful point. Thank you for saying that, Mallory. And the other thing was the mold. So make sure that you're not confusing the root hairs that are coming out of the root with mold, because sometimes it looks similar. And what you can do is you can kind of just run water through that, and if that fibrous kind of white material kind of goes away, that means it's roots. But if it doesn't, then it is mold, and that can be common with overwatering, especially for microgreens. And so what you'll want to do is you'll want to especially if it's an isolated area, you just kind of want to remove that, and the rest of it will be fine. But if it's kind of spread through, you probably want to kind of start over. But you haven't done anything wrong. I mean, just basically it's overwatering, or it's maybe an overly humid environment that it's in. And so it happens. And that's one thing, that's kind of our final note I want to say to everybody is, guys, patience in the winter. And these are living plants we're dealing with. And so things happen, right? And that's okay. And that's part of the learning process. If you would only know, like the things that happen to us. I mean, you guys saw the sage earlier. I mean, things happen and you learn from that. And then you start again. Or you learn how to work through that challenge. Totally. So that's the fun part of gardening.
Yep, all things are lessons, and just come to us. If something goes wrong, we will help you guys. Maybe even get you a replacement or something like that.
So exactly. Every month you're going to get new stuff, so no worries on that. But thanks again, you guys, for chiming in, and please post your questions. Keep them coming. Keep posting what you're doing. Love that some of you guys are starting to post some of the recipes you're making with the food. So this is a community where we're learning from each other. So wonderful. Have a great weekend, and cannot wait to see you guys next week for our smoothie challenge.